On a busy Manhattan afternoon, a billionaire had just stepped out of his office tower when a young girl in a worn hoodie suddenly bumped into him and darted into the crowd. In just seconds he reached for his chest pocket and froze. His wallet was gone. Anger burned through him as he took off after her, chasing her through 3 city blocks until she stumbled into a narrow alley with no way out. She hit the brick wall hard and slowly turned around, trapped. As he approached, phone in hand ready to call the police, the 12-year-old looked up at him with hollow eyes and whispered just 3 words. 3 words that brought tears streaming down the cheeks of a man who hadn't cried in 20 years. What he did next, and what he discovered when he made her take him 10 blocks east to a building that reeked of desperation, didn't just recover his wallet. It shattered everything he thought he knew about success, survival, and who deserves to be saved. Before we dive deeper into this story, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe because the stories we share here will change how you see the world. The collision was so quick that most people wouldn't have noticed it at all. Manhattan sidewalks during lunch hour moved like a living organism. Thousands of bodies flowing around food trucks, construction barriers, and impatient tourists taking photographs of buildings they'd forget by next week. The summer heat made everything shimmer, the air thick with exhaust fumes, hot dog grease, and the particular desperation of a city that never stopped moving. Daniel Whitmore had just exited the chrome and glass tower of Whitmore Capital, adjusting his tie with one hand while checking his Patek Philippe with the other. 42 years old, 6'2", wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, Daniel moved through the world with the unconscious confidence of someone who'd never been told no. He'd just closed a merger worth $840 million. His phone was buzzing with congratulations from board members. His assistant had already scheduled celebratory drinks at the Carlyle. Everything in Daniel Whitmore's precisely ordered universe was exactly where it should be. Then a small body slammed into him from the left, hard enough to jostle his shoulder. Daniel stumbled slightly, instinctively reaching to steady himself. His hand went to his chest, to the inner pocket of his jacket where his wallet always rested. Empty. The realization hit him like cold water. His wallet, his IDs, his credit cards, the $800 cash he'd withdrawn that morning, was gone. He spun around, scanning the crowd with the kind of focused intensity he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. That's when he saw her. A girl, maybe 12 years old, wearing a faded gray hoodie too large for her thin frame, was already 20 feet away and moving fast. Not running exactly, but weaving through the crowd with practiced efficiency, her small size allowing her to slip between people like water through cracks. "Hey!" Daniel's voice cut through the ambient noise, sharp and commanding. "Stop." The girl didn't stop. She moved faster. Something primal ignited in Daniel's chest. Not fear, not really, but anger mixed with disbelief. It was Daniel Whitmore. People didn't steal from Daniel Whitmore. He started moving, his long strides eating up the sidewalk as he pushed past a cluster of business students taking selfies. His expensive shoes, Italian leather, handcrafted, pounded against the concrete with a rhythm that matched his suddenly racing heart. The girl glanced back once, her face briefly visible beneath the hood. Dark eyes, sharp and alert. Not cruel, not mocking, just calculating. Then she turned the corner onto East 47th Street and accelerated. Daniel followed, his breath coming faster now. He hadn't run like this since college, since before his father's hedge fund became his and the gym membership replaced actual physical exertion. His tie flapped against his chest. Sweat began to gather at his collar. The girl was fast, impossibly fast, her small frame darting between pedestrians with the kind of agility that came from practice. She vaulted over a pile of cardboard boxes stacked outside a delivery entrance, landed lightly and kept moving. Daniel cursed under his breath and followed, less gracefully, his shoulder clipping the edge of the boxes and sending them tumbling. They turned onto a narrower side street, the kind that existed in the shadows between Manhattan's gleaming towers, cracked pavement, dumpsters smelling of rotting food, fire escapes hanging like metal skeletons against brick walls. The girl looked back again, and this time Daniel saw something different in her expression. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. The look of someone who knew what getting caught meant. She turned sharply into an alley, her sneakers, worn, barely held together with duct tape, scraping against the ground. Daniel followed, his lungs burning now, his perfectly tailored suit jacket soaked through with sweat. The alley narrowed further, ending in a brick wall covered with peeling concert posters and graffiti. A dead end. The girl slammed into the wall, her hands pressing against the brick as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. Then she spun around, her back against the wall, chest heaving. Daniel stopped about 10 feet away, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were their ragged breathing and the distant honk of car horns from the street beyond. Now that he could see her clearly, Daniel noticed details he'd missed in the chase. The hoodie was stained and frayed at the cuffs. Her jeans had holes at the knees, not the fashionable kind but the kind that came from genuine wear. Her sneakers were held together with gray tape. Her face was smudged with dirt, her hair tangled and unwashed. She couldn't have been more than 12, but her eyes held the kind of weariness that didn't belong to children. "You have no idea who you just stole from," Daniel said, his voice low and sharp as he straightened up. The girl didn't respond. She was watching him with those dark, alert eyes, her body tense like a trapped animal. Daniel pulled out his phone slowly. "I should call the police right now. You know that, don't you?" Still nothing. "What were you planning to do with it?" Daniel demanded, taking a step closer. "Buy drugs? Pay off some dealer? Or maybe you're part of a ring, a whole operation of kids running these scams." "I wasn't going to keep it." Her voice was so quiet Daniel almost didn't hear it. Raspy, worn thin, with a slight tremor that wasn't fear but exhaustion. Daniel frowned. "What?" "I just needed the cash." The girl's hands were trembling now, clutched against her chest. "Just enough for—" "I didn't mean to. I'm sorry." The apology caught Daniel off guard. Thieves didn't apologize, not in his experience. They made excuses, blamed circumstances, played victims. But this girl's voice carried something different. Not manipulation, but genuine remorse. "Sorry doesn't give me back my wallet," Daniel said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "I have it." The girl slowly reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out the leather wallet, holding it out with both hands like an offering. "Take it. Everything's there. I didn't use anything." Daniel stared at the wallet, then at her face. "Then why steal it in the first place?" The girl's eyes dropped to the ground. "My mom. She's sick. Really sick. And we need medicine, but I don't have money and nobody helps when you just ask. They walk past like you're invisible." The words hung in the narrow alley, heavy with a reality Daniel had never personally touched. "So you steal from people," Daniel said flatly. "So I tried something desperate," the girl corrected quietly. "Because watching your mom die is worse than being scared of getting caught." The simplicity of her logic hit Daniel harder than he wanted to admit. He took another step forward, hand extended. "Give me the wallet." She placed it in his hand without hesitation. Their fingers brushed briefly. Hers were cold, too cold for a summer day. Daniel opened the wallet. Everything was there. The cash, the cards, his ID, the photo of his ex-wife he kept meaning to remove. Nothing touched. "Your mom," Daniel said slowly, looking up at her. "She's really sick?" The girl nodded. "Heart problems. She had an episode in February. They gave her medication for a month, told us to get refills on our own. But we don't have insurance. The pills cost $400. We can't afford it." "Where's your father?" "Gone. Since I was 4. "Other family?" "It's just us." Daniel studied her face, looking for signs of deception. He'd spent 20 years negotiating with liars, could spot a con from across a boardroom. But this girl's eyes held only the kind of desperate honesty that came from having nothing left to lose. "What's your name?" Daniel asked. "Lily." "How old are you, Lily?" 12. "And you're out here stealing wallets because your mother can't afford heart medication." "I didn't know what else to do," Lily whispered. "I tried asking people for help. I tried everything. But when you're invisible, nobody cares." Before we continue with Lily and Daniel's story, tell us, what time is it where you're watching this right now? And where are you tuning in from? Drop your city, country, and the current time in the comments below. Let's see how far this story about second chances reaches across the world. Daniel slid the wallet back into his jacket pocket, his mind racing through calculations that felt different from his usual financial analyses. This wasn't about profit margins or risk assessment. This was about a 12-year-old girl cold-shouldered and desperate, and a mother dying because medication cost more than survival. "Where do you live?" Daniel asked. Lily's eyes widened slightly. "Why?" Because I want to see if you're telling the truth. Are you going to call the police? That depends on whether you're lying to me. So where do you live? Lily hesitated, then nodded toward the mouth of the alley. Not far. 10 blocks east. Show me. They walked in silence, an odd pairing that drew curious glances from passers-by. The billionaire in the tailored suit and the street kid in the worn hoodie, moving side by side through Manhattan's afternoon crowds. Daniel noticed how Lily navigated the city, how she instinctively stayed close to buildings, avoiding the center of sidewalks. How she sidestepped painted utility covers as if she'd learned they were slippery when wet. How she kept her head down, making herself small and unremarkable. The neighborhood changed gradually as they walked. The glass towers gave way to older buildings, brick and concrete showing their age. Storefronts became bodegas and check-cashing places. The sidewalks cracked and uneven, dotted with weeds growing through broken pavement. Lily led him to a building that looked like it had been on the verge of condemnation for 20 years. Faded red brick, windows covered with metal grates, a front door that hung slightly crooked on its hinges. She pushed through without a word, and Daniel followed into a hallway that smelled of mildew, old cooking oil, and something else he couldn't identify, the particular scent of poverty, of too many people living in too little space with too few resources. The elevator was broken, its doors held open with a cinder block. Lily gestured toward the stairs. They climbed 3 flights, the steps creaking under Daniel's weight. On the 3rd-floor landing, Lily stopped at a door marked 3F. No number plate, just hand-painted letters that were peeling. She unlocked it with a key she wore on a string around her neck. The apartment was smaller than Daniel's walk-in closet. One room, maybe 12 feet by 15, with a kitchenette along one wall and a bathroom behind a curtain. A mattress lay on the floor in one corner, carefully made with worn blankets. A small table missing a leg was propped up with stacked magazines. And in the far corner, in a sagging armchair that had seen better decades, sat a woman who looked like she was barely holding on to consciousness. Daniel's breath caught. The woman, Lily's mother, couldn't have been more than 35, but she looked ancient. Her skin had a grayish pallor, slick with fever sweat. Her breathing was shallow and labored, each inhale seeming to cost her. Her eyes were closed, her head lolled to one side. Lily dropped to her knees beside the chair, pulling a cloth from a bowl of water and gently wiping her mother's face. "Mom," Lily whispered. "I'm back. I brought someone who might help." The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. She tried to speak but only managed a weak sound. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, his expensive shoes suddenly feeling like they belonged to someone else, someone from a different planet. He'd seen poverty in statistics, read about it in reports, donated to charities that addressed it in the abstract. But this was real and immediate and happening in a room so small he could touch both walls with his arms extended. "When did she last take her medication?" Daniel asked, his voice rougher than intended. 3 days ago, Lily said, still focused on her mother. "That's when the pills ran out. She's been getting worse every day." Daniel pulled out his phone, already dialing. "What's the medication called?" Lily rattled off a name Daniel didn't recognize. He put the phone to his ear as it rang. "Mr. Whitmore," his assistant answered immediately. "The celebration dinner is confirmed for." "Cancel it," Daniel interrupted. "I need you to contact Dr. Reynolds at Lenox Hill. Tell him I need a medical team at—" He looked at Lily. "What's the address?" She told him, her voice shaking with something between hope and disbelief. Daniel relayed the information. "I need them here in 15 minutes. Full cardiac assessment. And contact that pharmaceutical rep we met last month. I need emergency authorization for—" He looked at Lily again. She repeated the medication name. "Got it," his assistant said, "all business now. Anything else?" "An ambulance. Discreet, fast, and I'm paying whatever it costs to move this to the front of every line." He hung up and knelt beside Lily, checking the woman's pulse. It was there but weak and irregular. "What's your mother's name?" Daniel asked. "Sarah. Sarah Chin." "Sarah," Daniel said clearly, hoping she could hear him. "My name is Daniel. Help is coming. Just hold on." The woman's eyes opened slightly, focusing on him with effort. Her lips moved, forming words without sound. Lily leaned in. "What, Mom? What are you trying to say?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Please, don't let them take her." The word stabbed into Daniel's chest. Even dying, this woman's first thought was protecting her daughter from a system that would separate them, put Lily in foster care, forget about both of them. "Nobody's taking her," Daniel said firmly. "I promise you." He didn't know if Sarah heard him. Her eyes had closed again, her breathing becoming more labored. Lily gripped her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face silently. "Please don't leave me. Please. I can't do this alone." In the distance, sirens began to wail, growing closer. Daniel stood, looking around the apartment with new eyes. The empty soup cans stacked neatly for recycling. The notebook on the table filled with careful handwriting, times, symptoms, medication schedules. The single photograph taped to the wall showing a younger Sarah holding a baby Lily, both smiling like the world held possibilities. This wasn't negligence or laziness or any of the things Daniel had unconsciously assumed about people in poverty. This was survival attempted with dignity, a mother and daughter fighting against a system designed to crush people who couldn't afford to stay healthy. The sirens stopped outside. Paramedics rushed in 3 minutes later, their equipment barely fitting through the narrow doorway. Daniel stepped back, giving them space, but kept his hand on Lily's shoulder. "Female, mid-30s, cardiac distress," the lead paramedic announced, already checking vitals. "Pulse weak and thready, BP dropping, respiratory rate elevated." They moved with practiced efficiency, transferring Sarah onto a stretcher, starting in 4, attaching monitors that beeped urgently. "We're taking her to Lenox Hill," the paramedic said. "Who's the guardian?" "She's with me," Daniel said, gesturing to Lily. "I'll bring her in my car." The paramedic nodded, already moving toward the door with the stretcher. Lily started to follow, but Daniel gently held her back. "Let them work. We'll meet her there." "But what if," Lily's voice broke, "what if she doesn't make it?" "Then she won't be alone," Daniel said quietly. "Because we'll be right there. Both of us." He pulled out his phone again, making arrangements as they descended the stairs. His driver would meet them outside. Dr. Reynolds was already at the hospital preparing. Everything that money and connections could mobilize was being deployed. But as they stepped into Daniel's town car, leather seats, climate control, a world away from Sarah's sagging armchair, he realized something that made his hands shake slightly. Money could buy doctors and medicine and hospital rooms. But it couldn't buy back the 3 years this woman had fought alone, couldn't restore the childhood Lily had lost to desperation, couldn't undo the 1,000 small deaths poverty inflicted on people the system rendered invisible. Lily sat rigid in the seat beside him, her fingers twisted together in her lap. "Why are you helping us?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked at her, this 12-year-old who'd stolen his wallet, who'd led him into a world he'd spent his entire life avoiding, who'd somehow cracked open something in his chest he'd thought was permanently sealed. "Because you asked," he said simply. "Because you were brave enough to do something desperate when everything else failed. And because—" he paused, searching for honesty. "Because if I don't help, then what's the point of having all this power?" Lily nodded slowly, then leaned her head against the window as they sped toward Lenox Hill Hospital, toward a crisis that would either save Sarah Chen's life or shatter the fragile family completely. And Daniel Whitmore, who'd spent 42 years building walls between himself and the messy reality of human suffering, felt those walls beginning to crumble with every mile. They arrived at Lenox Hill to organized chaos. Dr. Reynolds, a cardiac specialist Daniel had met at various charity functions, was already in the trauma bay when they rushed in. The ER staff recognized Daniel immediately, and suddenly bureaucracy dissolved. Sarah was taken directly to intensive care. Lily tried to follow, but a nurse gently stopped her. "Let the doctors work, sweetheart," the nurse said kindly. "You can see her soon." Lily stood frozen in the hallway, looking small and lost in the sterile brightness of the hospital corridor. Daniel knelt beside her. "She's getting the best care available. Dr. Reynolds trained at Johns Hopkins. He's one of the top cardiac specialists in the country. Will that be enough?" Lily whispered. "I don't know," Daniel admitted. "But it's better than nothing, which is what you had an hour ago." They sat in the waiting room, an odd pair among the worried families and exhausted medical staff. Daniel made more calls, his assistant coordinating with specialists, pharmacists, administrators. Every resource he could leverage was being deployed. 2 hours passed in that strange suspended time hospitals create. Lily didn't move, didn't cry, just sat with her hands folded in her lap, staring at the double doors leading to intensive care. Finally, Dr. Reynolds emerged, pulling his surgical mask down. His expression was grave. "She's stable," he said, "but barely. The cardiac failure is more advanced than I'd like. She needs a specific medication to stabilize her rhythm long enough for her body to respond to treatment. Problem is, it's expensive and not commonly stocked." "How expensive?" Daniel asked. "About $40,000 for the initial treatment protocol." The number that would have meant nothing to Daniel a few hours ago now felt obscene. This woman's life hung on $40,000, what he spent on a weekend trip to Aspen. "Get it?" Daniel said immediately. "Whatever it costs, whatever you need, get it now." Dr. Reynolds nodded. "I'll make the calls." As he walked away, Lily looked up at Daniel with eyes that had seen too much. $40,000, she repeated quietly. "I was trying to steal 800. "You were trying to save your mother with the only tools you had," Daniel corrected gently. "There's a difference." A nurse approached, her expression softening when she saw Lily. "Honey, you can see your mom now. Just for a minute." Lily stood quickly, then hesitated. "Will you come with me?" Daniel nodded, surprised by how much the request meant to him. Sarah lay in the ICU bed, a tangle of wires and tubes connecting her to machines that beeped steadily. She looked even more fragile against the white sheets, her skin almost translucent. But her eyes were open, and when they found Lily, they filled with tears. "Baby," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're okay." Lily rushed to her side, careful not to jostle the 4 lines. "I'm okay, Mom. You're going to be okay too. The doctors are helping. Daniel's helping." Sarah's gaze shifted to Daniel, standing quietly near the door. She studied him for a long moment, then mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Daniel nodded, his throat suddenly tight. They stayed for 5 more minutes before the nurse gently ushered them out. Sarah needed rest, needed the medication working through her system, needed time for her battered heart to decide whether it would keep fighting. In the hallway, Daniel's phone buzzed. His assistant with updates. The medication was being rushed from a specialty pharmacy in Boston. A private medical transport was bringing it. It would arrive within 3 hours. 3 hours between Sarah Chin and survival. Daniel relayed the information to Lily, who nodded numbly, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "When did you last eat?" Daniel asked. Lily thought about it. "Yesterday. Maybe. Come on." He led her to the hospital cafeteria, bought her a sandwich, soup, juice, and watched as she devoured it with the single-minded focus of someone who'd learned not to waste food. As she ate, Daniel studied her. In better light, away from the desperation of the chase and the crisis, he could see she was actually pretty, delicate features, intelligent eyes, the kind of face that should have been worried about school crushes and homework, not medication costs and mothers' failing hearts. "Tell me about your mom," Daniel said quietly. Lily swallowed a bite of sandwich. "She's the strongest person I know. She worked 2 jobs before she got sick, cleaning offices at night, working at a grocery store during the day. She always made sure I had what I needed, even if she went without." "What happened to your father?" "He left when I was 4. Mom said he couldn't handle the pressure, that some people aren't built for the kind of life we had. She never talked bad about him, even though he never sent money or called or anything." "How long has she been sick?" "The heart problem started a year ago. Small stuff at first, getting tired easily, shortness of breath. But we couldn't afford doctors, so we just managed. Then in February she collapsed at the grocery store. They called an ambulance, took her to the ER. That's when we found out how bad it was." Lily's voice stayed steady, factual, like she was reporting weather conditions rather than describing her mother's decline. "The hospital gave her a month of medication. Told us she needed to follow up with a cardiologist, get ongoing treatment. But the follow-up cost $800 just for the consultation. And the medications were $400 a month. We tried to get assistance, but we didn't qualify, made too much for Medicaid, not enough to actually afford anything. So she ran out of medication 3 days ago." "Yeah. I watched her get worse every day. And I really tried to earn money. I collected cans, did odd jobs, asked people for help. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough." She looked down at her sandwich, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "So I started taking things. Small stuff at first, food from stores, money from open purses. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd pay everyone back someday. But then Mom got worse and I got more desperate and Her voice broke. I'm sorry I stole from you. I'm really, really sorry. Daniel reached across the table, placing his hand over her small, cold fingers. Lily, you have nothing to apologize for. The system failed you. I failed you. Every person who walked past you asking for help failed you. You did what you had to do to survive. But it was still wrong. Maybe. But so is a world where 12-year-olds have to choose between morality and keeping their mothers alive. They sat in silence for a moment, the cafeteria noise buzzing around them, the clatter of trays, murmured conversations, the persistent beep of hospital equipment. What happens after? Lily asked quietly. If Mom gets better, we still don't have money. We still don't have insurance. We'll just end up right back here. Daniel had been thinking about exactly that question for the past 2 hours. In his world, problems had solutions. Expensive, complicated sometimes, but always solvable if you had enough resources and connections. But Lily's question cut deeper. This wasn't a problem to be solved with one dramatic gesture. This was systemic, structural, the kind of poverty that trapped people in cycles they couldn't escape no matter how hard they fought. One thing at a time, Daniel said finally. First we save your mother. Then we figure out the rest. But even as he said it, Daniel knew the rest was already forming in his mind. A plan that would require more than money, more than connections, more than the kind of transactional charity he'd always practiced from a comfortable distance. This would require something he'd spent years avoiding. Genuine involvement in another person's messy, complicated, heartbreaking life. The medication arrived at 9:47 p.m., rushed through hospital protocols with the kind of speed money and influence could buy. Dr. Reynolds administered it himself, monitoring Sarah's vitals with the focused intensity of someone who knew he was fighting for more than just one life. Daniel and Lily watched through the observation window as Sarah's heart rhythm began to stabilize, the erratic beeping smoothing into something more regular, more hopeful. It's working, Dr. Reynolds said, emerging from the room. Her response is better than I'd hoped. She's not out of danger yet, but if we can keep her stable through the night, I think we have a real chance. Lily sagged against Daniel, her body finally releasing tension she'd been holding for days. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, feeling her shake with silent relief. You can stay here tonight, the nurse told them. There's a family room with couches. I'll bring blankets. But Daniel shook his head. Actually, I have a better idea. He made 2 more calls. First to his housekeeper, preparing a guest room. Then to his driver, who arrived 20 minutes later. Lily, you need real rest, Daniel said gently. And your mother needs you healthy and strong when she wakes up. My place has plenty of room. You can shower, sleep in an actual bed, eat a real meal. Lily hesitated, looking back at the ICU. But what if something happens? The hospital has my number. If anything changes, we're 15 minutes away. But right now, the best thing you can do for your mom is take care of yourself. After a long moment, Lily nodded. They left the hospital as night settled over Manhattan, the city transforming into a landscape of lights and shadows. Lily stared out the car window at a world she'd moved through but never quite belonged to, the gleaming restaurants, the well-dressed crowds, the casual wealth displayed in shop windows and valet stands. Daniel's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building in Tribeca. The elevator opened directly into his foyer, where original artwork hung on walls painted in subtle grays and blacks. Lily stepped out slowly, her worn sneakers silent on polished marble floors. I've prepared the blue guest room. Mrs. Chen, Daniel's housekeeper, appeared with a warm smile. Fresh towels, comfortable clothes in various sizes. You must be Lily. Lily nodded, overwhelmed. Come, dear. Let's get you settled. As Mrs. Chen led Lily down the hall, Daniel stood in his living room, 1,500 square feet of carefully curated emptiness. Original Rothko on one wall. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city. Furniture that cost more than most people's cars. It had always felt like success before. Now it just felt hollow. He poured himself a scotch, stood at the window, and watched the city lights blur as he finally acknowledged what today had done to him. In the span of 8 hours, his entire worldview had been dismantled by a 12-year-old girl desperate enough to steal and honest enough to give everything back. And tomorrow, when Sarah Chen woke up, if she woke up, Daniel Whitmore would have to decide whether this was just a dramatic gesture or the beginning of something that would change all 3 of their lives forever. Daniel woke at 5:30 a.m. to his phone buzzing on the nightstand. His hand shot out instinctively, heart already racing before his eyes fully opened. "Mr. Whitmore?" Dr. Reynolds's voice carried the careful tone doctors used when delivering news that required delicacy. "Sarah Chin is stable, but we need to discuss some complications that developed overnight." Daniel sat up, already reaching for clothes. "What kind of complications?" "She's responding well to the cardiac medication, but the episode caused some neurological concerns. We ran an MRI around 3 a.m. when she reported numbness. There appears to be reduced function in her lower extremities, possibly temporary, possibly not. We won't know the extent until the swelling around her spinal cord decreases." The words settled like stones in Daniel's stomach. "You're saying she might be paralyzed?" "I'm saying we need to monitor closely over the next 48 hours. The lack of oxygen during her cardiac distress may have caused nerve damage. It could resolve on its own, or she might be looking at long-term mobility issues." Daniel closed his eyes. "Does Lily know?" "Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first, given the circumstances. I'm bringing her in now. Don't tell her until we get there. She should hear it from her mother, not strangers in white coats." He ended the call and stood in his bedroom, looking at the perfectly made bed, the closet full of suits that cost thousands, the bathroom with marble imported from Italy. Everything in his life designed for one person who needed nothing from anyone. That world felt like it belonged to someone else now. He dressed quickly, jeans and a simple button-down instead of his usual armor of tailored wool, and walked down the hallway to the guest room where Lily had slept. The door was already open. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed in clothes that were slightly too big for her thin frame, her hair still damp from a shower. She'd folded the blankets with military precision, placed the borrowed pajamas neatly on the dresser. "Did the hospital call?" she asked immediately, reading his expression. "Your mom's stable," Daniel said, choosing his words carefully. "But Dr. Reynolds wants to talk to us about her recovery. We should go now." Lily stood without question, grabbing the worn hoodie she'd arrived in despite the clean clothes available. Daniel understood. It was armor, the one familiar thing in a world that had become unrecognizable overnight. Mrs. Chin appeared with a bag of fresh pastries and coffee. "For the road," she said gently, pressing them into Daniel's hands. "And I made sandwiches for later. Hospital food is terrible." The gesture, small, maternal, human, made Daniel's throat tighten. How many times had he eaten in this penthouse alone, never once thinking about the woman who kept his life organized, who now treated a street kid with more warmth than he'd shown most people in years. The drive to Lenox Hill was quiet. Lily ate a croissant mechanically, staring out the window at a city waking up to another day of relentless motion. Delivery trucks, early commuters, street vendors setting up carts, the machinery of urban survival grinding forward without pause. "Whatever they tell us," Daniel said as they pulled up to the hospital, "we'll handle it. Together." Lily nodded, but her hands were shaking. Dr. Reynolds met them outside Sarah's room, his expression professionally neutral. "She's awake and alert. Cognitively she's doing well. But she's experiencing significant numbness and loss of sensation from the waist down. We're running more tests, but I wanted you both to be prepared." Lily's face went pale. "She can't walk." "We don't know yet. The next few days will tell us more about whether this is temporary inflammation or permanent damage." He opened the door and Lily rushed to her mother's bedside. Sarah looked better than yesterday, color had returned to her face, her breathing was steady, her eyes clear and focused. But the way she lay completely still, the careful flatness of the blanket over her legs, told its own story. "Lilybug," Sarah said, using the nickname that belonged to better times. Her voice was stronger, but carried an edge of fear she was trying to hide. "Come here, baby." Lily took her mother's hand, tears already streaming down her face. "Mom, what's wrong?" the doctor said. "I know what he said." Sarah's voice was steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "My legs aren't working right now. The doctors think it might be from when my heart stopped. They're not sure if it's permanent yet. But you're going to be okay, right? You're going to get better?" Sarah looked past her daughter to Daniel, standing quietly near the door. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of the impossible complexity they were facing. "I'm alive," Sarah said finally. "Yesterday I wasn't sure I would be. So we're already better than we were. Everything else we'll figure out as we go." The bravery in her voice, the determination to protect her daughter even while facing the possibility of permanent disability, hit Daniel like a physical force. Over the next week, the complications multiplied in ways that statistics and medical journals couldn't capture. Sarah's cardiac function improved steadily. The expensive medication Daniel had procured worked exactly as promised, stabilizing her heart rhythm and allowing her body to begin healing. But the neurological damage remained stubbornly persistent. Physical therapists came daily, working her legs through exercises designed to stimulate nerve response. Sometimes there were flickers, a toe twitch, a muscle spasm, but nothing sustained, nothing that suggested function was returning. Sarah bore it with a stoicism that broke Daniel's heart. She never complained, never asked, "Why me?" never showed anything but gratitude to the medical staff working to help her. But Daniel saw the fear in her eyes when she thought no one was watching, the way her hands clenched when therapists delivered disappointing updates. Lily stayed at the hospital from early morning until visiting hours ended, doing homework in the corner, reading to her mother, helping nurses with small tasks that made her feel useful. At night, she returned to Daniel's penthouse, to the guest room that was slowly accumulating pieces of her life. Library books, school assignments, the few possessions Daniel had retrieved from their condemned apartment. The social worker visited on day 5. A woman named Patricia Gomez with kind eyes and a clipboard full of forms that represented the bureaucratic machinery designed to process cases like Sarah and Lily's. "I need to understand the living situation," Patricia said gently, sitting across from Sarah's hospital bed. Daniel and Lily both present. "Miss Chin, you're currently unemployed due to disability. You have no permanent address as your previous residence has been condemned. You have a minor dependent who needs stable housing and education." Sarah's jaw tightened. "We'll manage. We always do." "I'm sure you will," Patricia said, her voice carrying practiced empathy. "But my job is to ensure Lily's welfare. If you're unable to provide stable housing and care during your recovery, we may need to explore temporary foster placement." "No." The word came from 3 voices simultaneously. Sarah struggled to sit up straighter. "You're not taking my daughter." "I'm not taking anyone," Patricia said calmly. "I'm explaining what the system requires. If you can demonstrate stable housing and adequate support during your recovery, Lily stays with you. But Miss Chin, you're looking at months of rehabilitation, possibly permanent mobility limitations. How do you plan to provide for your daughter when you can't work?" The question hung in the air, brutal in its practicality. "I'll provide," Daniel said quietly. All 3 women turned to look at him. "I'm sorry?" Patricia's pen hovered over her forms. "I have adequate housing. More than adequate. Sarah and Lily will stay with me during the recovery period. I'll cover medical expenses, living costs, whatever's needed until Sarah is stable enough to make long-term decisions." Patricia studied him carefully. "And what's your relationship to this family, Mr. Whitmore?" The question should have been simple. Instead, it opened a chasm of complications Daniel was only beginning to understand. He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound absurd. "I'm someone who wants to help." "That's generous, but the state requires more specific documentation for guardianship situations." "Are you family? Legal guardian? What's the nature of your connection?" Sarah spoke up, her voice stronger now. "He saved my life. And he's offered us help when everyone else looked away. That's the nature of our connection." Patricia made notes, her expression neutral. "I'll need to conduct a home visit, verify the living arrangements are suitable for a minor, run background checks. If everything passes inspection, Lily can remain in your care during Miss Chen's hospitalization and recovery. But understand, this is temporary. Long-term solutions will need to be addressed." After she left, Sarah looked at Daniel with an expression that mixed gratitude and something close to desperation. "You don't have to do this," she said. "You've already done more than anyone could ask." "I know I don't have to," Daniel replied. "But I want to. Unless you're not comfortable with it." "Comfortable?" Sarah's laugh was brittle. "I'm terrified. Terrified of depending on someone I barely know. Terrified of what happens when you get tired of playing savior and we're back to nothing. Terrified that I'm putting my daughter's future in the hands of a stranger." The honesty cut deeper than any accusation could have. "I understand," Daniel said quietly. "And I can't promise I won't mess this up. I've spent my entire life avoiding exactly this kind of messy, complicated involvement. But Sarah, I'm not walking away. Not from you, not from Lily. You're both stuck with me until we figure this out. Sarah searched his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. But on one condition. I'm not your charity case. When I can work again, I pay you back. Every dollar. And in the meantime, I contribute however I can. I won't be a burden. Deal, Daniel said, understanding that pride was sometimes all people had left. If you believe the system that forces sick mothers to choose between medication and keeping their children deserves to be completely reformed, hit that subscribe button right now. Only those who accept poverty as someone else's problem won't engage. Show that you stand for families like Sarah and Lily's. The home visit came 3 days later. Patricia Gomez arrived at Daniel's penthouse with a checklist and a skepticism born from years of seeing good intentions collapse under the weight of reality. She inspected the guest room where Lily slept. Spacious, clean, with its own bathroom and enough closet space for a family of 4. She reviewed Daniel's financial statements, background check, employment history. She interviewed Mrs. Chun about the household routine, asked Lily private questions about whether she felt safe, examined the refrigerator contents like they might reveal hidden dysfunction. Finally, she sat in Daniel's living room and delivered her assessment. Everything checks out legally, Patricia said. The space is more than adequate. Mr. Whitmore has no criminal history, stable employment, strong references. Lily reports feeling safe and cared for. But Daniel heard the unspoken reservation. But this is unusual, Mr. Whitmore. You're a wealthy single man taking in a homeless 12-year-old and her disabled mother. That raises questions about motivation, sustainability, appropriate boundaries. What questions specifically? Whether this is a genuine commitment or a temporary impulse driven by guilt or savior complex. Whether you understand the long-term implications of what you're offering. Whether this arrangement serves Lily's best interests or just makes you feel good about yourself. The accusation stung precisely because Daniel had asked himself the same questions. I don't have perfect answers, he admitted. But I know that Lily needs stability, Sarah needs support during recovery, and I have resources I've spent years hoarding while people like them suffered. Maybe my motivations aren't pure. Maybe I am trying to fix something broken in myself. But does that matter if the outcome is that they're housed, fed, safe, and together? Patricia was quiet for a moment. No, I suppose it doesn't. But Mr. Whitmore, be sure. Because if you change your mind 6 months from now, the damage you'll do to that child will be worse than anything poverty has done. I won't change my mind. People always say that. Then reality sets in. Lily has trauma, trust issues, behavioral challenges you haven't seen yet. Sarah will have good days and bad days, independence and dependence. This won't be the heartwarming story you're imagining. It'll be hard, complicated, and thankless most of the time. I know. Do you? Patricia leaned forward. Because in my experience, rich people like the idea of helping more than the reality of it. The judgment in her voice sparked something defensive in Daniel, but he swallowed it. She wasn't wrong. How many charity galas had he attended, writing checks that eased his conscience while changing nothing fundamental about the systems that created poverty? Maybe you're right, Daniel said finally. Maybe I'll fail at this. But I'd rather fail trying than succeed at continuing to ignore people who need help. Patricia studied him for a long moment, then signed her forms. Temporary approval granted. I'll check in monthly. If anything concerns me, we revisit the arrangement. Clear? Crystal. After she left, Daniel stood at his window watching the city below. Millions of stories unfolding simultaneously, most of them invisible to people in buildings like his. He'd spent 42 years in this tower, looking down at the world without truly seeing it. Now a 12-year-old thief had dragged him into the street-level reality he'd always avoided, and there was no going back to comfortable ignorance. Sarah came home 3 weeks after her initial crisis, discharged from the hospital into Daniel's care with a wheelchair, a bag of medications, and a physical therapy schedule that would consume the next 6 months minimum. Daniel had prepared obsessively. He'd installed grab bars in bathrooms, ramps over the few steps in his penthouse, purchased a specialized bed that could adjust positions. He'd hired a part-time nurse, scheduled therapists, created a medication tracking system. But nothing prepared him for the actual reality of Sarah Chin in his space. She moved through the penthouse like a ghost at first, overwhelmed by the sheer excess of everything. Rooms larger than her entire former apartment. Closets full of clothes that cost more than she'd earned in months. Art on walls that could have paid for a lifetime of her daughter's education. "This is too much," she said on the first evening, sitting in her wheelchair by the window, Lily curled up beside her on the couch. "I don't belong here." "Neither did I at first," Daniel replied, bringing tea he'd learned to make because Sarah liked it. "My father built this place as a monument to his success. I inherited it along with everything else. But it never felt like home until—" He stopped, surprised by what he'd been about to say. "Until what?" Lily asked. "Until now," Daniel finished quietly. "Until it had people in it who needed it to be more than just expensive square footage." Sarah looked at him with eyes that carried decades of disappointment with powerful people making promises. "How long will you let us stay? How long do you need?" "That's not an answer." "Yes it is," Daniel insisted. "This isn't a temporary fix with an expiration date. This is your home for as long as you want it to be. People don't just give away homes to strangers." "Maybe they should," Daniel said. "Maybe the world would be better if people with excess space shared it with people who have none." Lily looked between them, reading tensions she couldn't fully understand. "Can I show Mom my room?" she asked, breaking the moment. "It's your room," Daniel said gently. "You don't need permission." As Lily wheeled her mother down the hall, chattering about the books Daniel had bought, the desk overlooking the city, the closet that seemed enormous, Sarah caught Daniel's eye one more time. "Thank you," she mouthed. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. The first month was an education in humility Daniel hadn't known he needed. He learned that recovery wasn't linear. Some days Sarah's legs showed improvement, sensation returning in patches, muscles responding to therapy. Other days, nothing worked, and she'd spend hours staring out windows with an expression that told him she was calculating futures she didn't want to imagine. He learned that Lily carried trauma in ways that emerged unexpectedly. She hoarded food in her room despite the always full kitchen. She woke from nightmares about her mother dying, about being sent to foster care, about Daniel deciding they were too much trouble. She flinched when people raised their voices, even in contexts that had nothing to do with her. He learned that poverty left scars money couldn't heal. One afternoon, he found Sarah crying in her room, her wheelchair positioned by the window, physical therapy equipment untouched beside the bed. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked from the doorway. "Are you in pain?" "I'm useless," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "My daughter watches me lie here while you work and pay for everything. I can't contribute. I can't help. I can't even walk to the bathroom without assistance." Daniel entered slowly, pulling up a chair beside her. "You're healing. That's your job right now." "That's not a job. That's dependency. And I swore I'd never depend on anyone after Lily's father left. I swore I'd rather die than be a burden." "You're not a burden. You're a person recovering from a medical crisis. In someone else's house, eating someone else's food, living on someone else's charity." Sarah's voice was sharp with self-loathing. "Do you know what that does to a person? To watch their child getting used to a life they'll never be able to provide." The question hung between them, heavy with implications Daniel was only beginning to grasp. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "I want to contribute. To feel useful. To be more than just a patient you're warehousing out of guilt." Daniel thought about it, then made a decision. "Can you use a computer?" Sarah blinked at the unexpected question. "Yes, why?" "Because I have a business that runs on information, analysis, pattern recognition. And I have employees who are good at their jobs but not great. If you're strong enough to work a few hours a day, I can set you up with projects that actually matter. I don't have a college degree. I worked retail and cleaning jobs. And you managed to keep your daughter fed, clothed, and educated on poverty wages while fighting a terminal illness. That takes more strategic thinking than most MBAs demonstrate. So yes, I think you can analyze market data if I show you what to look for." Sarah stared at him, suspicion and hope warring in her expression. "You're making this up to make me feel better. I'm offering you actual work at actual pay which you can accept or refuse." "But Sarah, I mean it. I need people who can see patterns, who understand desperation and human behavior. You've survived systems designed to crush you. That's expertise I can't buy." After a long moment, Sarah nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll try." "Good. You start Monday. And Sarah? You're not charity. You never were." He left before she could argue, but he heard her crying again. Different tears this time, the kind that came from hope rather than despair. 2 months in, Lily started having problems at the private school Daniel had enrolled her in. It began small, whispered comments from classmates about the charity case, living with a billionaire. Questions about whether she was his illegitimate daughter, his ward, some kind of project. Teachers who meant well but treated her like she was fragile, damaged, someone to be handled carefully rather than challenged academically. Lily endured it silently at first, her survival instincts telling her to keep her head down, not make waves, not risk losing this stability. But children could be cruel in ways adults forgot. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from the principal. Lily had gotten into a physical altercation with another student, a boy named Trevor Harrison whose father sat on the same boards as Daniel. "I need you to come in," Principal Morrison said carefully. "This requires a parent conference." Daniel arrived to find Lily sitting outside the principal's office, her face tear-streaked but defiant. The boy, Trevor, sat across from her with a split lip and his mother hovering protectively. "What happened?" Daniel asked, kneeling beside Lily. "He said Mom was a crippled beggar and you were keeping us like pets." Lily's voice shook with anger rather than fear. "He said we should be grateful you haven't gotten bored and thrown us back on the street yet." Daniel felt rage ignite in his chest but forced it down. "So you hit him?" "I told him to shut up first." "You didn't?" "So yeah, I hit him." Mrs. Harrison stood, her voice dripping with indignation. "Your ward assaulted my son. She's violent, clearly traumatized, and has no business in a school like this." "Your son," Daniel said, his voice dangerously quiet, "verbally assaulted a child who's been through more hardship in 12 years than he'll face in his entire privileged life. Maybe instead of demanding apologies, you should teach him basic human decency." Principal Morrison intervened. "Mr. Whitmore, we have a zero-tolerance policy for violence." "Then enforce it equally," Daniel interrupted. "Psychological abuse is violence." What Trevor said was designed to hurt, humiliate, and remind Lily that she doesn't belong. "If you're suspending her, you're suspending him too." The meeting deteriorated from there. Eventually, both children received 3-day suspensions. Daniel left with Lily, his arm around her shoulders, feeling her shake with emotions she couldn't name. In the car, she finally broke. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong there. Maybe we should just go back to—" "No." Daniel's voice was firm. "You belong anywhere you choose to be, Lily. Those kids are ignorant and cruel because they've never had to be anything else. But you're stronger, smarter, and braver than all of them combined. But what if they're right about you getting bored? What if you wake up one day and realize we're too much trouble?" Daniel pulled the car over, turning to face her fully. "Lily, listen to me. I'm not getting bored. I'm not giving up. You and your mom have changed my life in ways I'm still figuring out. And yes, it's complicated and messy and nothing like I expected. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. Promise?" "I promise. You're stuck with me, kid. For keeps." She threw her arms around him, crying into his shoulder, not the silent tears of someone used to suffering alone, but the loud, messy sobs of a child finally believing she might be safe. Comment: everyone deserves dignity. If you believe kids like Lily shouldn't be bullied for surviving poverty. Let's show that wealth doesn't determine worth, and that compassion matters more than privilege. Only those who defend cruelty stay silent. That evening, Sarah was waiting when they got home, her wheelchair positioned where she could see the door. Mrs. Chin had clearly called ahead. "Lilybug, come here," Sarah said, and her daughter went immediately, curling up beside the wheelchair. "I'm sorry I got in trouble," Lily whispered. "I'm not," Sarah said firmly. "I'm proud you stood up for yourself and for us. But baby, you can't let other people's ignorance make you doubt what we're building here." "What are we building?" Lily asked. "Because I don't know what to call this anymore." Sarah looked up at Daniel, standing quietly in the doorway. The question wasn't just Lily's, it was hers too. "We're building a family," Daniel said, the words feeling both terrifying and absolutely right. "Not the traditional kind, not the kind that makes sense on paper. But the kind that matters. People who choose each other, who show up for each other, who don't walk away when things get hard." "Is that what you want?" Sarah asked. "Really?" "More than anything," Daniel admitted. "I've spent my entire adult life alone, telling myself I didn't need anyone. But you two showed me what I was missing. And if you'll have me, if you'll let me be part of whatever this becomes, I'd like to make it official. Official how? Lily asked. Daniel hadn't planned this. The words were emerging from somewhere deeper than strategy or calculation. I want to be your guardian, Lily. Legally. Permanently. Not because Sarah can't take care of you, but because I want to be the person who shows up to parent-teacher conferences and helps with homework and scares off boys when you're 16. He turned to Sarah. And I want you to stay. Not as a guest, not as someone I'm helping temporarily. As family. As someone who belongs here as much as I do. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Daniel, you can't just adopt strangers because you feel guilty. This isn't guilt, Daniel interrupted. This is the first time in 20 years I've felt like I'm living instead of just existing. You two gave me that. So maybe I'm the one who should be grateful. The three of them sat in Daniel's perfect living room, a room that had always been designed for impressing rather than living, and for the first time it felt like a home. 3 weeks later, the legal paperwork was filed. Daniel Whitmore officially became Lily Chen's co-guardian, sharing legal responsibility with Sarah. It was complicated, requiring lawyers and social workers and documentation, but every signature felt like building something that mattered. Sarah's recovery continued its slow, unpredictable path. 6 months after her cardiac arrest, she could walk short distances with a walker, though the wheelchair remained necessary for anything requiring stamina. The doctors said she'd likely never regain full mobility, but what she had was enough. Enough to contribute to Daniel's business from home, enough to be present for Lily, enough to build a new life around limitations that once would have destroyed her. And Daniel Whitmore, who'd spent 42 years building walls between himself and genuine human connection, learned that sometimes the most profitable investment was the one that couldn't be measured in dollars. It was measured in the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through halls that had been silent too long. In Sarah's quiet good morning as they shared coffee before the day began. In the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of becoming the family none of them expected but all of them desperately needed. 1 year after Lily Chen stole Daniel Whitmore's wallet, the three of them sat around the dining table in what had once been a showpiece and was now simply home. Daniel was reviewing quarterly reports, reading glasses perched on his nose in a way that made him look almost professorial. Sarah worked beside him, her wheelchair pulled up to the table, laptop open as she analyzed market data with the kind of sharp attention to detail that had made her invaluable to his business. Lily sprawled across 2 chairs doing algebra homework, occasionally stealing bites from a bowl of grapes placed between them. The scene was ordinary. Domestic. The kind of unremarkable Tuesday evening that happened in millions of homes across the country. But for these 3 people, ordinary was a miracle they'd built piece by careful piece from the wreckage of their separate broken lives. Mom, is 12x plus 7 equals 43 the same as x equals 3? Lily asked, chewing on her pencil. Sarah glanced over without looking up from her screen. Show me your work. Lily slid her notebook across the table. Sarah studied it, then pointed to a line. You subtracted 7 from only one side of the equation. What's the rule about balance? Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other, Lily recited, then groaned. I'm an idiot. You're learning, Sarah corrected. There's a difference. Daniel watched them, a small smile playing at his lips. These tiny moments of guidance and frustration and growth, was what he'd been missing without knowing it. The texture of family life, messy and imperfect and completely irreplaceable. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Reminder, charity gala tomorrow night. +1 confirmed? Daniel had avoided these events for months, knowing the questions would be invasive and the judgment harsh. Manhattan's social elite didn't understand complicated family structures that didn't fit neat categories. But hiding felt like cowardice. And if he'd learned anything this year, it was that the opinions of people who'd never fought for survival mattered far less than the respect of the 2 women sitting across from him. There's a fundraiser tomorrow night, Daniel said, closing his laptop. For Children's Hospital expansion. I'm expected to attend. Sarah looked up, reading the tension in his voice. And you're worried about bringing us. Not worried. Just aware that people will ask questions, make assumptions, say things that might be hurtful. When haven't they? Lily muttered, returning to her homework with more force than necessary. The past year hadn't been easy. Lily's school situation had improved after Daniel made substantial donations and joined the board, giving him leverage to address bullying directly. But whispers continued. Speculation about their relationship, Cruel comments about Sarah's disability, assumptions about Lily's past. Sarah had faced her own challenges. Working remotely for Daniel's company meant proving herself to colleagues who assumed she was a charity hire. Some respected her sharp analysis and unconventional insights. Others dismissed her as the boss's pet project. But they'd survived. More than survived, they'd built something real and resilient. "We should go," Sarah said firmly. "All three of us. Let them see exactly who we are." "You don't have to," Daniel began. "I know I don't have to. I want to." "Lily?" The girl looked up, uncertainty flickering across her face. Then her jaw set with familiar determination. "If we're family, we show up together. Right?" Daniel felt something warm expand in his chest. "Right?" The Metropolitan Museum's great hall glittered with the kind of casual wealth that once would have felt natural to Daniel and now felt vaguely obscene. Champagne flowed from ice sculptures. A string quartet played Mozart near towering flower arrangements that cost more than most families spent on groceries in a month. Daniel entered with Sarah beside him in an elegant wheelchair, custom-made, beautiful, and uncompromising in its visibility. Lily walked on his other side, wearing a simple navy dress that Sarah had helped her choose, her hair pulled back to reveal a face that had lost some of its wariness over the past year. The conversation in their immediate vicinity didn't stop exactly, but it shifted, volume dropping, eyes cutting sideways, the social calculation happening in real time. Daniel felt Sarah's hand tighten on her armrest and placed his own hand gently on her shoulder. "Steady," he murmured. "Always," she replied. They'd barely made it 10 feet before Victoria Ashford, a board member's wife who'd known Daniel for years, approached with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Daniel, darling, we've missed you at these events." Her gaze flickered to Sarah and Lily with unconcealed curiosity. "And you've brought guests." "Family," Daniel corrected gently but firmly. "Victoria, this is Sarah Chen and her daughter Lily. Sarah works with me at Whitmore Capital. Lily's in 7th grade at Dalton." "How lovely." Victoria's tone suggested it was anything but. "And how did you all meet?" The question carried layers of implication, the demand for a story that would satisfy gossip or confirm suspicions. Sarah spoke before Daniel could. Lily mugged him. The bluntness of it rendered Victoria momentarily speechless. Lily fought back a smile. "She stole my wallet," Daniel added, his tone conversational. "Led me on a chase through Manhattan, and in the process, taught me more about real courage and dignity than I'd learned in 40 years of comfort." "How unconventional," Victoria managed. "The best things usually are," Sarah said pleasantly. "Now if you'll excuse us, I believe they're serving those tiny quiches Lily's been eyeing since we arrived." As they moved away, Lily whispered, "Mom, you told her I mugged Daniel?" "Truth is better than pretty lies," Sarah replied. "Let them gossip about facts instead of making up stories." Over the course of the evening, they encountered the full spectrum of reactions. Some people were genuinely warm, asking thoughtful questions about Sarah's work and Lily's school. Others were coldly polite, the kind of courtesy that barely masked judgment. But something unexpected happened as the night progressed. People who'd survived their own struggles, a widowed CEO, a philanthropist who'd grown up in foster care, a tech founder who'd been homeless at 16, sought them out, drawn to the authenticity of their unconventional family. "You're braver than I was," the tech founder, Marcus Way, told Daniel during a quiet moment. "I spent years hiding where I came from, trying to fit into this world by erasing my past. You're building a bridge instead." "I'm not brave," Daniel said. "I just finally stopped being a coward." Near the end of the evening, a young woman approached Lily tentatively. She was maybe 16, wearing an expensive dress that didn't quite fit right, her posture carrying the same guarded tension Lily knew too well. "Hi," the girl said quietly. "I'm Emma. My foster parents brought me tonight. I just wanted to say, I heard what your mom said about how you met, and I think it's really cool that you guys are so honest about it. Most people at these things pretend everything's always been perfect." Lily studied her, recognizing a kindred spirit. "What's your story?" "Foster system since I was 8. My current family's nice, but it's temporary." "It's always temporary." "Not always," Lily said, glancing at Sarah and Daniel standing nearby. "Sometimes people choose to make it permanent." "You're lucky." "I'm loved," Lily corrected. "There's a difference. Lucky is random. This took work." They exchanged numbers, two girls who understood survival in ways their privileged peers never would, building a connection across the divide between their past struggles and uncertain futures. On the drive home, Lily was quiet, staring out the window at Manhattan's glittering skyline. "You okay?" Daniel asked. "People were staring at us all night, talking about us, making judgments." "Yes," Sarah acknowledged. "Did it bother you?" Lily thought about it. "Not as much as I expected. Because we know the truth. We know what we built and why it matters. Their opinions don't change that." "No," Daniel agreed. "They don't. But I met this girl Emma who's in foster care. And I kept thinking, if things had gone differently, if you hadn't helped us, I might be in the system too. And there are thousands of kids like her who don't get someone like you showing up." The observation hung in the car, heavy with implications. "What are you thinking?" Sarah asked her daughter. "That maybe we should do something. Not just be grateful we survived, but help other people survive too." Daniel glanced at Sarah in the rearview mirror. They'd talked about this privately, but hearing it from Lily gave the idea new weight. "What if we started a foundation?" Daniel said. "Specifically for families in medical crisis. Help with medication costs, housing during recovery, job training for parents who've been out of work due to illness." "The Chin Whitmore Foundation," Lily said immediately. "Just the Whitmore Foundation would be fine," Sarah began. "No," Daniel interrupted gently. "Lily's right. This should represent all of us. The Chin Whitmore Foundation. Built on the idea that everyone deserves a second chance, that families shouldn't be torn apart by medical debt, and that sometimes the most important investment is in people who've been rendered invisible." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "That's a lot of responsibility." "Good thing we're used to carrying heavy loads," Daniel replied. "Hit subscribe if you believe families like Sarah and Lily's deserve help without judgment or shame. Show that medical crises shouldn't destroy lives, and that community support matters more than bootstrap mythology. Only those who blame the poor for their poverty won't engage." The Chin Whitmore Foundation launched 6 months later in the same community center where Sarah had once tried unsuccessfully to get assistance. Daniel had purchased the building, renovated it, and transformed it into a comprehensive support center offering medical advocacy, emergency housing assistance, job training, and direct financial aid for families facing the kind of crisis Sarah and Lily had survived. The opening ceremony was small and meaningful rather than glamorous. Former recipients of emergency assistance spoke about what intervention had meant: a mother whose diabetic son got insulin, a father whose cancer treatment didn't bankrupt his family, a grandmother who kept custody of her grandchildren because housing assistance prevented homelessness. Sarah addressed the crowd from her wheelchair, her voice steady and clear. "3 years ago, I was dying in a room that barely qualified as housing, watching my daughter try to save me by stealing from strangers. We were invisible to a system that claims to care for its citizens but actually only serves those who can afford to be seen." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room full of people who understood exactly what she meant. One man saw us. One man chose to care. And that single choice changed 3 lives completely. But individual charity isn't enough. We need systemic change, community support, a recognition that healthcare and housing and dignity are rights, not privileges. The room erupted in applause. This foundation exists because Daniel Whitmore got his wallet stolen and chose curiosity over anger. It exists because Lily Chin was brave enough to steal for love instead of greed. It exists because I refused to die quietly. And it exists for every family currently facing the same impossible choices we faced. The choice between medication and rent, between treatment and groceries, between survival and dignity. More applause, but Sarah held up her hand. "We can't save everyone. This foundation has limits, financial, logistical, practical. But we can save some. We can be the miracle someone prays for. We can be the reason a child doesn't have to steal to keep their parent alive. And that's worth everything." As Sarah finished speaking, Daniel stood beside her, Lily on his other side. 3 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, now using their story to create possibilities for others. Emma, the foster teen Lily had met at the gala, was in the front row. She'd been invited to intern at the foundation, her first-hand knowledge of the system making her invaluable. Beside her sat Marcus Way, the tech founder, who donated $500,000 and was recruiting other entrepreneurs to contribute. The foundation wasn't solving poverty. But it was creating cracks in the wall between desperation and hope, and sometimes that was enough. 2 years after the foundation's launch, Sarah walked into the office using only a cane. The journey from wheelchair to walker to cane had taken 3 years of relentless physical therapy, small victories celebrated and setbacks endured. Her mobility would never be what it was before the cardiac arrest, but she'd regained enough function to move independently through most spaces. Daniel looked up from his desk when she entered, a smile breaking across his face. "Walking." "Walking," Sarah confirmed, lowering herself carefully into the chair across from him. "Dr. Reynolds says I've plateaued. This is probably as good as it gets. But this is pretty damn good. It's miraculous. It's expensive physical therapy and access to the best medical care money can buy," Sarah corrected, though her voice was warm. "Which most people in my former situation will never have. Which is why we're expanding the Foundation's medical advocacy program," Daniel replied, sliding a folder across the desk. "I want to hire 3 full-time patient navigators who help families access the care you would have been denied." Sarah opened the folder, scanning the proposal. As always, Daniel had thought of everything: salary structures, training programs, metrics for success. "You're really doing this," she said softly. "Building a whole system around what happened to us." "We're doing this," Daniel corrected. "You run the foundation day to day. Lily chairs the youth advisory board. I just write the checks. You do more than that." "Maybe. But Sarah, this only works because people trust you. Because when you tell someone facing medical bankruptcy that they're not alone, they believe you. You've lived it." Sarah nodded slowly, then looked up at him with an expression that had taken years to develop. Trust mixed with affection, respect earned through hundreds of small choices to show up, to care, to stay. "Can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said. "Always." "Are you happy? Really happy, not just fulfilled through charity happy, but actually content with your life?" Daniel leaned back, considering the question seriously. "I spent 40 years chasing a version of success that left me isolated and empty. I had everything society says matters: money, power, recognition, and none of it meant anything because I had no one to share it with." He gestured around the office, which had been transformed from minimalist showcase to working space filled with family photos, Lily's artwork, foundation client thank you notes pinned to boards. "Now I have breakfast with my family every morning. I help Lily with homework I barely understand. I argue with you about foundation budgets and listen to you tear apart my market analyses. I go to bed exhausted and wake up with purpose. So yes, Sarah. I'm happier than I've ever been." "Good," Sarah said. "Because you deserve it. Not because you saved us, but because you chose to become someone worth saving." The observation hit Daniel with unexpected force. He'd spent years thinking of himself as their rescuer, but Sarah was right. They'd rescued him just as much, pulled him out of a life that looked successful but felt like slow suffocation. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For stealing my wallet." Sarah laughed, the sound filling the office with warmth. "Technically, Lily stole your wallet. I was unconscious at the time." Details. At 16, Lily Chin was unrecognizable from the desperate 12-year-old who'd picked pockets to buy her mother's medication. She was tall now, her frame filled out with proper nutrition and the growth spurt that came from not carrying constant stress. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail. She moved through the world with confidence that came from knowing she belonged, that she had people who would fight for her. She sat in Daniel's home office, laptop open, working on a presentation for the Foundation's Youth Advisory Board. The group, which she'd helped establish, focused on how poverty affected children specifically: educational barriers, trauma responses, systemic obstacles most adults didn't recognize. "I think we should add a section on food insecurity in schools," Lily said without looking up. "A lot of kids are going hungry because lunch debt policies are insane." Daniel nodded from his desk where he was reviewing investment portfolios. "What are you proposing?" "Partner with schools to eliminate lunch debt entirely. The foundation pays off existing debt and covers meal costs for families who qualify. It's not that expensive compared to our other programs, and the impact is huge." "How huge?" Lily pulled up statistics she'd compiled. "Kids who eat regular meals perform better academically, have fewer behavioral issues, better attendance. It's literally one of the highest ROI interventions we could make." Daniel studied her presentation, professionally formatted, backed by solid research, arguing from both moral and practical angles. This was the same girl who'd struggled with basic algebra 4 years ago, now presenting policy proposals that would actually work. "When did you get so smart?" he asked. Lily grinned. "I've always been smart. I just finally have resources that match my intelligence." "Fair point. Okay, write up a formal proposal for the board meeting next month. If the numbers work, we implement it." "Really? Really? Lily, you have good instincts about what people need because you've lived it. That's worth more than any consulting firm I could hire." Lily saved her work, then swiveled to face him. "Can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever regret it? Taking us in, I mean. Your life was simpler before we showed up." Daniel set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "Lily, my life before you was empty. Successful, yes. Comfortable, absolutely. But empty. You and your mom gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. A reason to care about more than just accumulating wealth. But we complicated everything. Your social life, your reputation, your privacy." "You did," Daniel agreed. "And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Lily, I'd rather have a complicated, messy, real life with you and Sarah than a perfect, lonely existence without you. Promise?" It was the same question she'd asked years ago, sitting in his car after being suspended from school. The fear underneath hadn't fully disappeared, probably never would, but it had quieted significantly. "I promise. You're stuck with me, kid. For keeps." Lily nodded, satisfied, and returned to her work. But Daniel sat thinking about how much had changed, not just for them, but rippling outward in ways they were only beginning to measure. Comment: invest in people. If you believe helping one family can create ripples that transform entire communities, let's show that compassion is contagious and that small acts of courage can become movements. Only those who hoard wealth and power stay silent. 5 years after Lily stole Daniel Whitmore's wallet, the Chin Whitmore Foundation had served over 2,000 families, prevented 847 evictions, paid for medication that kept 200-plus people alive, and created a model that 15 other cities had replicated. But the numbers didn't capture what mattered most. They didn't measure the foster teen who avoided homelessness because emergency housing assistance kept her placement stable. The single father whose daughter got cancer treatment because patient navigators fought his insurance denial. The grandmother who kept custody of her grandchildren because job training got her employed. The foundation had become something larger than its founders intended, a proof of concept that compassion could be systematic, that individual stories could scale into institutional change, that the distance between desperation and dignity was sometimes just one person willing to see another person's humanity. Daniel stood in the foundation's lobby, which displayed photos of families they'd helped alongside quotes from clients. "You gave me my mother back. Lily Chin, age 12. You taught me that asking for help isn't weakness. Sarah Chin. You reminded me that wealth means nothing if we don't share it. Daniel Whitmore." The quotes had become the foundation's unofficial motto, a recognition that everyone involved, helpers and helped, had been transformed by the encounter. Sarah appeared beside him, walking steadily with only a slight limp now. "Remembering where we started?" "Always," Daniel replied. "It keeps me grounded." "We have a new intake," Sarah said, pulling out her tablet. "Single mother, cardiac issues, can't afford medication. 12-year-old daughter trying to figure out how to keep her alive." "Sound familiar?" Daniel's chest tightened. "Too familiar." Emma's handling the case. She remembered her conversation with Lily at that gala years ago and specifically requested this family. Emma had thrived at the foundation, eventually earning her social work degree while working full-time. She understood the client's fear because she'd carried it herself, knew how to navigate systems because she'd been crushed by them. "Will they be okay?" Daniel asked. "They will now," Sarah said confidently. "Because someone will see them, help them, remind them they matter. Just like someone did for us." That evening, the three of them, Daniel, Sarah, and Lily, sat on the terrace of what they now called home without hesitation or qualification. Lily was studying for college entrance exams, hoping to get into Columbia's social work program. Sarah was reviewing foundation budgets, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Daniel was pretending to read a book but mostly just watching them, still occasionally overwhelmed by the sheer improbability of this family. "I've been thinking," Lily said, setting down her study guide. When I give my college admissions essay, I'm going to tell the truth. About stealing your wallet, about mom almost dying, about all of it. You don't have to, Daniel began. I know, but I want to. Because it's my story and I'm not ashamed of it anymore. We survived something that destroys most families. We built something beautiful from something broken. That's worth sharing. Sarah reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand. You're right. Our story matters because it proves that poverty isn't a moral failure, that asking for help is brave, and that sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect. Or the ones whose wallets we steal, Lily added with a grin. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the terrace into the New York night. Below them, the city pulsed with its relentless energy. Millions of people moving through their own struggles, their own triumphs, their own desperate measures and unexpected grace. Somewhere in those streets, another family was facing the impossible choice between survival and dignity. Another child was trying to save a parent with resources that would never be enough. Another person was walking past someone who needed help, making the split-second decision whether to see or ignore another human's suffering. And because of 3 people who'd collided on a Manhattan sidewalk 5 years ago, there was now one more place that family could turn, one more voice telling them they mattered, one more proof that the world could be better than the system designed to crush them. I love you both, Daniel said quietly, the words still feeling new even after years of saying them. We know, Sarah and Lily replied in unison, then laughed at the synchronization. But we love you too, Sarah added. Even though you were a terrible wallet guardian. The worst, Lily agreed solemnly. Completely oblivious to professional pickpockets. I've improved, Daniel protested. I'm much more aware of my surroundings now. Only because we trained you, Sarah teased. They sat together as the sun set behind Manhattan's skyline, 3 people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something that would outlast all of them. Not just a foundation or a family, but a testament to what happened when someone chose to see instead of look away, to care instead of judge, to build bridges instead of walls. And in the morning they'd wake up and do it again, help another family, fight another injustice, prove once more that the distance between desperation and hope was sometimes just one person brave enough to steal a wallet and one person compassionate enough to ask why. Tap like if this story reminds you that one moment of compassion can change multiple lives forever. Show that choosing to see people's humanity instead of judging their desperation creates ripples we can't predict. Only those who prefer comfortable ignorance scroll past without engaging. 10 years after the chase through Manhattan streets, Daniel Whitmore stood at a podium addressing Columbia University's graduating social work class. Lily sat in the 3rd row wearing her cap and gown, graduating summa cum laude with a thesis on medical debt's impact on family stability. Sarah sat beside her, walking independently now, her recovery complete enough that most people never knew she'd once been told she might never walk again. I was asked to speak today about success, Daniel began, his voice carrying across the auditorium. And for most of my life, I defined success by financial metrics, profit margins, market share, personal wealth accumulation. I was very successful by those measures. I was also profoundly alone. He paused, finding Lily and Sarah in the crowd. Then a 12-year-old girl stole my wallet. And instead of calling the police, I asked why. That question, that moment of curiosity instead of judgment, changed my life more than any business deal I've ever closed. The graduates leaned forward, engaged by the unexpected honesty. Lily Chin, who's graduating today with honors, taught me that desperation and morality aren't opposites. Her mother, Sarah, taught me that dignity persists even when systems try to crush it. Together, they taught me that real success isn't measured by what you accumulate, but by what you give away, who you lift up, and whether your life makes the world slightly more compassionate than you found it. He gestured to the graduates. You've chosen a profession that will never make you rich by conventional standards. You'll work with people society has rendered invisible, the poor, the addicted, the traumatized, the ones our systems fail daily. You'll be exhausted, heartbroken, and underpaid. But you'll also be essential. You'll be the person who sees someone when everyone else looks away. You'll be the question why, when everyone else is ready to judge. You'll be the bridge between desperation and hope. His voice grew stronger. The Chin Whitmore Foundation exists because social workers believed a dying woman and her desperate daughter deserved help. Because someone asked questions instead of making assumptions. Because the system failed, but individuals chose to care anyway. So my challenge to you is this: be the person who asks why. Be the one who sees instead of ignores. Be the bridge. Because 10 years ago, a girl stole my wallet, and I could have called the police and felt righteously vindicated. Instead, I asked why, and it gave me a family, a purpose, and a reason to believe that individual choices can create systemic change. The applause began slowly, then built to a standing ovation. After the ceremony, Lily found Daniel in the crowd of celebrating families. That was a pretty good speech for someone who used to think success was measured by Forbes rankings. I had good teachers, Daniel replied, pulling her into a hug. I'm so proud of you, Lily. Thanks, Dad. The word still caught him off guard sometimes, even though Lily had been calling him that for 3 years now, since the official adoption was finalized, making legal what had already been true in every way that mattered. Sarah joined them, and they stood together amid the chaos of graduation. The photos, the tears, the excited chatter about futures being launched. What's next? Sarah asked Lily. The foundation offered me a position as Director of Youth Services, Lily said. But I also got accepted to the MSW program here. I'm thinking I do both, work and grad school. Follow your example of never taking the easy path. That's my girl, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. They left Columbia's campus and walked through the same Manhattan streets where everything had begun. Past the building where Daniel's old office had been. Past the block where Lily had bumped into him, starting a chain reaction neither could have predicted. The city had changed in 10 years. New buildings, different stores, the relentless churn of urban evolution. But the undercurrents remained. Wealth and poverty existing side by side, visible and invisible people sharing the same sidewalks, thousands of desperate choices being made every day by people trying to survive systems designed to crush them. We can't save everyone, Lily said quietly, echoing her mother's words from the foundation launch years ago. No, Daniel agreed. But we can save some. And the ones we save can save others. And maybe, eventually, we change enough individual stories that the system itself has to transform. That's optimistic, Sarah observed. I learned optimism from a woman who kept fighting when doctors said she'd never walk again, and a girl who stole to save her mother instead of surrendering to despair. If you too can be optimistic, so can I. They stopped at the corner where it had all begun, the exact spot where Lily had bumped into Daniel, where his hand had gone instinctively to his pocket, where he'd made the split-second decision to chase instead of ignore. Thank you, Daniel said quietly. For stealing your wallet? Lily asked with a grin. For trusting me enough to show me the truth. For being brave enough to ask for help in the only way you knew how. For giving me a family when I didn't even know I needed one. Thank you for asking why, Sarah replied. For choosing curiosity over judgment. For seeing us when we'd become invisible to everyone else. They stood together in that spot, billionaire, disabled mother, college graduate, 3 people who defied every category, who'd built something beautiful from something broken, who proved that family wasn't about biology or convention but about showing up, caring deeply, and refusing to walk away when things got hard. And in that moment, on that corner, in that city of millions, they were exactly where they belonged. Together. This has been a story from Blissful Whispers, where we share narratives that remind us that one moment of compassion can ripple outward in ways we can't predict, that asking why instead of judging transforms lives, and that family is built through choice and commitment rather than blood and tradition. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that the people society renders invisible are often the ones who teach us the most valuable lessons, share it with someone who needs to hear that desperation and dignity can coexist, that asking for help is brave, and that second chances are real when someone chooses to see instead of look away. Because Lily's story, of stealing from desperation and being met with curiosity instead of condemnation, is happening right now on streets across the world. Families are facing impossible choices. Children are trying to save parents with resources that will never be enough. People are walking past suffering they could address if they just ask why. Subscribe to Blissful Whispers for more stories proving that individual choices create systemic change, that compassion is contagious, and that the distance between desperation and hope is sometimes just one person brave enough to steal and one person compassionate enough to understand. Where are you in your journey? Are you the person who asks why or the one who looks away? Have you ever been desperate enough to make choices you never imagined, or compassionate enough to see beyond the surface? Drop your thoughts in the comments because your story matters too. This has been Blissful Whispers, where we don't just tell stories, we document the truth that everyone deserves to be seen, that poverty is a systemic failure rather than a personal one, and that the most profitable investment is always in another human being's dignity and potential. Thank you for journeying with us through Daniel, Sarah, and Lily's transformation. At Blissful Whispers, we believe the most powerful stories are those that strip away comfortable assumptions and reveal the shared humanity underneath our different circumstances. If today's story touched your heart, if it challenged your perspectives about poverty, family, and what we owe each other, click subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the voices that demand to be heard. Because sometimes the most important question isn't, what did they do wrong, but, what would I do in their position? And sometimes the greatest gift isn't charity, but simply seeing another person's humanity clearly enough to ask why instead of judge. This has been Blissful Whispers, where every voice matters, where every story counts, where truth speaks louder than assumptions and compassion transforms more than money ever could.